Welcome to this lecture. We are still continuing on Unit 2, Accounting for Financial Instrument. And in this session, which is session 3, we are looking at IFRS 9, Financial Instrument, Recognition and Measurement. IFRS 9, Financial Instrument, Recognition and Measurement. At the end of this session, it's expected that we'll be able to explain the recognition criteria for financial instrument. To discuss the initial measurement of financial instruments and outline the subsequent accounting for equity instruments issued by an entity. These are the three main session objectives we are to achieve at the end of this lecture. Now, the standard is recognition and measurement, IFRS 9. Recognition is the process of capturing for inclusion in the statement of financial position or the statement of financial performance an item that meets the definition of an asset, a liability, equity, income, or expense. An entity shall recognize a financial asset or a financial liability in its statement of financial position when and only when the entity becomes a party to the contractual provisions of the instrument. So, if you are not a party to these contractual provisions, then you cannot recognize a financial asset or a financial liability in your statement of financial position. And you only recognize this when, or you capture this when the item meets the definition of an asset, a liability, equity, income, or expense. Even if it meets it, you have to ensure that you are a party to the contractual provisions of the financial instrument before you can recognize it in your books. Initial measurement of financial instrument. Financial instruments are initially measured at fair value. They are measured at fair value, plus or minus. The plus or minus is in the case of a financial asset or financial liability that is not measured at fair value through profit or loss. So you do plus or minus transaction cost. So if the financial instrument is not measured at fair value, or you don't measure it through fair value through profit or loss, then the initial measurement will be fair value plus or minus the transaction cost, the cost you have incurred in acquiring that particular instrument. But in a situation where you are measuring the instrument through profit or loss, then you have to go and expense the transaction cost in profit or loss. You don't bring it here. But if you are not measuring the instrument through profit or loss, you have to add it to the fair value. It's either you add or you subtract. So if it is a financial asset, you add. That is a plus. If it's a financial liability, you subtract. So you have to look at the perspective. Who are you preparing the statement for? Is it the issuer or the holder, the acquirer or the issuer? Aside that, all financial instruments are initially measured at fair value. Whether asset, liability, or equity, they are all measured at fair value. That is the initial measurement. As part of our objectives, we want to look at a subsequent accounting of equity instrument on the perspective or the issuer perspective, on the entity that issued the shares. So what is the subsequent measurement? We know that the initial measurement is for it to measure it at fair value. But what is the subsequent measurement when we are looking at the issuer perspective or the issuer? Now with the issuer, with equity instrument, no further remeasurement for financial instrument classified by the issuer as equity. So the issuer who issued a financial instrument as equity, after the initial measurement, there is no remeasurement. Changes in the fair values are ignored by the issuer and only recognized by the holder of the investment in equity. So you, the issuer, after the initial measurement, even if there is a change in fair value, you can't do any further remeasurement. That will be done at the end of the acquirer, the holder of that equity instrument. So in summary, we are saying equity instruments are initially measured at fair value less any issue cost. Less any issue cost. So it's working as a liability, you less it. They are not remeasured subsequently. And changes in fair value of the equity are experienced or recognized by the investor. So it's the investor that will recognize a change in fair value. Now, dividends are paid at the discretion of the entity and accounted for as a reduction in retained earnings, which is recognized in the statement of changes in equity. So if you, the issuer, you paid dividend, this dividend you paid, which is at your discretion, is accounted for as a reduction in retained earnings because you paid dividend out of retained earnings, and we recognize this in the statement of changes in equity. Now we have redeemable shares, which are financial liabilities. Or when we say redeemable shares, they are financial liabilities. Why are they financial liabilities? Because they contain the obligation to pay. So we say redeemable at a future date, and as a result of that, you, the issuer, you have an obligation to pay, so it becomes a liability, a financial liability for that matter. So this is the summary when it comes to the subsequent measurement on the side of the issuer, and that is the third objective we have to look at. So in this session, we have been able to look at IFRS 9, recognition and measurement. We look at the initial measurement and the subsequent measurement with regards to equity instrument or from the side of the issuer. And the subsequent sessions will try and look at how will measure a subsequent measurement for asset and financial liability. Try as much as possible to read the model, understand what is there, ask questions. Ask questions. Thank you very much and see you in the next session.